Good to see you. Nice to see you. Well, it is wonderful to be back at Wakefield. Some of you remember I was here a couple of years ago, right? Or was it a year and a half ago? I know I had less gray hair the last time I was here. We wanted to stop by because we have a very special guest here today. But before I do that, I just want to say, I'm assuming you guys are all aware that this is Miss Fraley's birthday. Yes. Should we sing Happy Birthday? Yes. So let's all kick this off. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Miss Fraley. Happy birthday to you. For those of you in the back, you should know that Ms. Fraley was selected as one of the Virginia Teachers of the Year. So we're very proud of that. I was just talking to her. It turns out that she's been teaching now for 10 years. Before she was teaching, she was a journalist. So she decided to make a change and get into something useful. I couldn't resist. I couldn't resist. Now, for our real order of business here, we have a wonderful special guest. This is Prime Minister Gillard. She has come all the way from Australia. She will be addressing a joint session of Congress, which is a very unique honor. Few heads of state get the privilege of addressing a joint session of Congress, but the reason that she's been asked to do this is because we have as close of an alliance with Australia as any country in the world. We have shared democracy, we have shared values. You know, their football's a little different than ours, but you know, there are very few countries where we've got such a close bond and such a unique bond, and that dates back for decades, but it's also manifest today where, for example, Australia is one of the leading coalition partners in Afghanistan, so our soldiers are fighting side by side. We cooperate on a whole range of security issues and economic issues. The reason we wanted to stop by a school was in part because Prime Minister Gillard used to be the Minister of Education in Australia, and so she takes a great interest in how our young people are developing and how we're preparing them for the 21st century economy. So we are thrilled to have her here. Madam Prime Minister.
Thank you very much. I was saying to the President as we came here that I've been to a Washington school before, or when I was in Washington and was taken to a school. It was actually a primary school, much younger children, and I was a few minutes into my address when one small boy turned to the small boy next to him and said, "Is she speaking English?" So, provided all of you understand me today, I'm going to count this as a success. But I thought I would come along today and just talk to you about Australia and actually start by asking you a few questions. Bit of a pop quiz about Australia. You're looking confident?
You guys better be prepared.
Okay.
Don't embarrass Miss Fraley.
Right, we've got some Australian journalists here, so if you can't answer the questions, then I'm sure they'll be able to. So, anybody got any idea the population of Australia? How many people? Oh, just a guess.
Anybody want to take a stab?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Oh,
very close.
Very close. 22 million. That's
What,
well
do you have
done.
like an iPad over there? That's pretty impressive. Good job. All right.
Okay, what about size? How big is it? As big as America?
A little bit bigger.
A little bit bigger.
Oh, really?
No? You're giving us a little bit of extra
A little bit
terrain.
smaller.
It's a little bit about there were only two choices, weren't there? A little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. No, it's about 20% less in size than America, but 22 million people, 20% less in size. So that's worth knowing. Who knows anything about Australian rules football?
Ask him.
You do.
I've watched a little bit of it.
You've watched a little bit, and what do you think? Pretty tough game?
It's hard to understand.
Okay, I've been trying to describe it to the President. It can be a bit hard to understand.
She brought me
when
an Australian football. She was kicking it in my office. almost broke a bust of Lincoln. It was really funny. That's not true, guys. I'm just making that up.
I was
I don't
handballing
want
it
to
in
cause
the
a
office. and then-
diplomatic
Yeah,
incident.
we were never near breaking anything, were we, when we were handballing it? So has anybody got a question about Australia? Yes, uh-oh.
My family and I have been wondering this for a little while. What is Vegemite?
Right. This is also a little bit of a division between the President and I. I love Vegemite and
It's horrible.
it's actually a byproduct of making beer, apparently. That's how the story goes. It's a yeast paste. I'm making this sound really good, aren't I? It's black and it's quite salty. The beginner's error with Vegemite is to put too much on your piece of bread or piece of toast. You don't put it on like jam or anything like that. You've got to do it very lightly, spread it very thinly, and it's good.
So it's like a quasi-vegetable byproduct paste that you smear on your toast for breakfast. Sounds good, doesn't it?
We'll get some sent over, and you can have a try. It's addictive. Once you've had some when you were small, you will crave it when you're an adult.
All right, fair enough.
You've got to start eating it when you're young, though. Other Australian questions? Yes.
What's the biggest difference between Australian schools and US schools?
Biggest difference? Oh, look, I think a lot of things are the same. We've got about 9,500 schools in the country, so a lot less than here, which is what you would imagine. I think the things that we study and the way that we benchmark standards are around about the same. And one of the things we're both trying to do, so President Obama's very focused on and I'm very focused on, is making sure the schools that haven't been meeting the right national testing results are getting boosted up, because we don't want disadvantaged students falling behind. So I think if you went to one of our schools, you'd see a classroom pretty much like this one.
How has the flooding affected education and how kids get to school and stuff?
Yeah, look, it did stop kids going to school for a while. So we had the flooding right through Queensland, and then we had the cyclone, which hit in north and far north Queensland after that. Some of the schools they brought back a few weeks late because kids couldn't get to school or the schools were flood damaged. But people are getting back into it and back into normal life now. A lot of the schools acted as relief centres, so during the worst of the flooding, that is where people could go to pick up food supplies or to see someone who might be able to help them with emergency cash, or put them in contact with a counsellor if they were finding the strain of it too much. So schools were a real backbone, but kids missed a few weeks of school. Some of the kids I talked to thought that wasn't such a bad deal, missing a couple of weeks of school, but everybody's getting back into it now.
Now, the flooding area was about the size of Texas, is that right? The amount of land that was covered by the floods.
It was huge. We were, the comparison we were doing was a bit like France and Germany, that kind of size, so a huge area. And I had the opportunity to go up in the air and see it a few times, and just filthy flood water, because flood water is filthy, as far as the eye could see. And it was a sort of rolling crisis, so we had flooding in places like Rockhampton, and then it came down to some small places like Dalby and Condamine. So that was the first phase of it. And then we had those very dangerous flash floods in Toowoomba and into the Lockyer Valley. They cost people a lot of lives were lost because there was no warning. And then Brisbane, which is one of our big cities, was flooded. So we had a whole capital city closed down for a few days because of the flooding. And then when we gotten through all of that, then we had a Category 5 cyclone hit in the north and far north, and that caused a lot of devastation in places like Tully and Cardwell, which had been evacuated because the force of the cyclone was going to be so strong. So it's been a tough time, but Queenslanders particularly resilient sorts. They breed them pretty tough in Queensland, so they're getting on with it and rebuilding. It's been a big summer.
Anybody else?
President, when did you come to Australia?
You know, well now.
She's joined the class.
Right. I actually went to Australia. So some of you know that when I was a kid, I lived in Indonesia briefly for about 4 years. And Indonesia is sort of in the same vicinity as Australia. So when you fly, back then at least, now there are probably more direct flights, but back then, oftentimes you'd have to fly through Australia. So I ended up having a chance to get to know Aussies when I was 8 years old, and wonderful people. And very similar to Americans in the sense that very open, very friendly, partly because we were talking about this earlier, you know, they have a similar sort of frontier spirit. You know, there's a lot of open space there, a lot of people who obviously migrated there, and some by choice, some
not so
some
much.
not so much.
Early convicts, not so much by choice.
But you know, so you have a similar openness, you know, a great a premium on individualism and you know, freedom. So there's a lot that binds our two countries together. Any other questions? You guys can ask questions for me if you want.
You play basketball?
Yeah, we do play basketball in Australia. In fact, Secretary Duncan is over here, your Secretary of Education.
Arne Duncan.
And he played basketball in Australia.
Played professional basketball in Australia.
Was the leading scorer for 4 years. Love it.
Were you the leading scorer in the league? Come on, Reggie. I might believe it. He's still got game, by the way.
I went to a basketball game in Townsville earlier this year. They're the Townsville Crocs. So they come with a mascot, which is a man in a crocodile suit, and anything can happen when that mascot's there, I can tell you.
Anybody else? Don't be intimidated by these guys.
How many of these presidents can you name around?
That's Lincoln. And that's Washington.
You're over there.
How's that?
You're over there.
Nice.